I'm a living proof of a miracle of a second chance. I grew up in a troubled family. My mom had me when she was very young and not quite ready to be a mom. She married my birth father, divorced him, and remarried. My stepdad was the man that I knew as my dad. He was in the Air Force, and so we moved a lot. He also drank a lot, and my parents yelled a lot. By the age of 16, I stepped in as an arbitrator, refereeing their many fights. I separated my mom away from my dad, and then waited for my dad to pass out. Say the least, I had a lousy roadmap to follow to be a good husband and a father one day. But I was given a second chance. I joined the Air Force myself right out of high school. And it wasn't the Air Force that gave me a second chance. It started the night I was hitchhiking home, and this couple in a VW Bug stopped and gave me a ride. They gave me a little thing called the Four Spiritual Laws and said I should read it. Well, I looked it over when I got home and tossed it in the trash. When I was in basic training, one of the guys asked me directly, was I saved, and did I believe in Jesus? That was a new one. I said, I believe in God, and he said I need to believe in Jesus to be saved. And shortly after this encounter, when I was at Dover Air Force Base, two guys knocked on my door in the barracks, and one was carrying a Bible. They came in and drew out an illustration, putting God on one side and me on the other. Then they drew a wide gulf between God and me because of sin. The second chance for me came when they drew a cross that bridged the gap. And one guy turned the paper over and drew a door. He had me read Revelation 3:20, which says, behold, I stand at the door. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. He told me that Jesus was knocking to be let in. It was up to me to open the door. I opened the door. That all happened on a Monday night, November 3rd, 1975. Those guys invited me to a Bible study the next night, and I went and started a journey knowing Christ and making him known, a journey that isn't over yet. Then a guy named Danny Sullivan discipled me. Week after week for 2 years, we met together, we studied the Bible together, we prayed together, we ate together, goofed around, and he even taught me how to balance my checkbook. Well, for those of you who are too young to know what a checkbook is, it is a small ledger. You write down how much you spend. If you don't know what it means to write down anything, you do this with something called a pencil. It's got a graphite point at one end of the wooden stick that leaves a mark on the paper. Once out of the Air Force, I stayed at Dover to get more help and more involved in the Navigator ministry at the Air Force Base. A year later, I was invited to move to Colorado Springs to the Navigator's headquarters at Glen Eyrie to be their mechanic. Sounded good to me. I was an amateur mechanic already, so I was glad to even raise $100 a month per support. And back in 1979, that was a lot of money. While at Glen Eyrie, I met John Crawford, who was on Navigator staff in Oklahoma City. I was so impressed with him after having dinner with him that I prayed and asked God if I could live with he and his wife Helen so I could get more training. And John came back to Glen Eyrie and we had breakfast together. He asked me, John, what are you doing with your life? Do you have any plans? So I gave him a couple possibilities, and then he asked me if I would come to Oklahoma to live with him and Helen. Well, God answered my prayer, but be careful what you pray for. I had no idea what I was in for. This was another second chance. John and Helen modeled for me a good marriage, or what a good marriage and parenting looked like. John taught me the life principles from the Bible and how to apply them in my everyday life. He taught me how to think a new thought. Then the Crawfords invited me one week to go with them to Bill Gothard's Basic Youth Conflicts Conference. There I heard a talk about the sins of the fathers being passed down to the next generation. As I thought about this, I realized that my birth father fit this scriptural principle and not my stepdad. With the help from my mom, I located my birth father. When I called him, he was excited to hear my voice. I flew to upstate New York to meet him, and he asked me why I turned out all right. I told him because I let God into my life. The next 30 years, we had a relationship and a second chance for both of us. I helped him become a first-time grandpa because of our children, and we had lots of visits with him. When he passed away, he left an inheritance which significantly helped our son Michael get through graduate school at USC in film scoring. This was a dream of his since high school. In the spring of 1985, I met my wife Nell at a Navigator conference in Norman, Oklahoma, and Nell was living with Bill and Helen Webster, who are navigators in Little Rock, Arkansas. They came to the conference, and Bill asked me if I would like to meet a really sharp gal. Well, that was a new approach. Nell and I started a long-distance courtship, which ended up with her moving to Oklahoma City through answer to prayer. We have been married 35 years and have 2 adult children, Michael and Hannah. Danny Sullivan gave me the heart and vision for investing my life in discipling one-on-one, and John Crawford built on that foundation. The first man that I discipled was at Dover Air Force Base, was Bob. I did what Danny taught me to do. And over the years, I've been involved in discipling men in groups or man-to-man. Nell and I sensed that God called us to go on the associate staff of the Navigators, so we did, and we raised support to cover our ministry expenses. But several months ago, my Navigator supervisor asked me when I would leave my full-time job at Dell and come on full-time with the Navigators. I told Mike that John Crawford used to say, you grow into ministry, not go into ministry. Well, Mike said, but what if God wanted to expand your ministry? Well, that would be difficult as I had a 40-hour per week occupation already. So Mike kept asking me for the next few months, so Nell and I decided we need to seek God's will about this. And we went to a Navigator Senior Staff Conference and sought counsel and received a lot of positive confirmation from the staff we spoke to. So the next question was, when should we do this? So the very next day, after returning from the conference, the team that I had been with for many years had a special Zoom meeting with the managers. Our manager informed us that he had taken another manager assignment in the company, and then his manager introduced us to a new manager who would be taking over. Sounds like writing on the wall. I noticed the product we supported was taking fewer calls and that we were overstaffed. So Nell and I saw this as God's timing to lead Dell and come on full-time with the Navigators. A verse that gave me confirmation out of my quiet time in Isaiah 54, 2 through 3. It says, in the Message, it says, clear lots of ground for your tents. Make your tents large, spread out, think big. Use plenty of rope. Drive your tent pegs deep. You're going to need lots of elbow room for your growing family. You're going to take over whole nations. You're going to resettle abandoned cities. Just as I was given a second chance years ago, I'm devoting my life to helping other men get a second chance through finding and following Christ so they can do the same with others.
Amen.